Hey everybody, welcome back to Coach All Rights. Before we get started, please be sure to subscribe and turn those notifications on. That way you don't miss any future AP Lang content. Let's start by answering the question, what exactly is a synthesis essay? I like to think of it as a mini research paper. Basically, in a synthesis essay, you have to make an argument. You need to support that argument using at least 3 of the provided sources. Usually there are 6. You need to thoughtfully integrate that evidence. You want to make sure you're citing your sources clearly. And then, arguably, the hardest part of a synthesis essay is providing commentary that explains the significance of the evidence. I mentioned that there are usually 6 sources and you need to cite 3 of them. So let's talk about what those types of sources usually are. You're likely to see articles or possibly opinion pieces, maybe an interview, and depending on the topic, you might see a historical document. There are also visual texts. Some are quantitative, meaning they have numbers, so things like charts or tables or graphs. You're guaranteed one of those. Now, it's possible that you might have 2 visual texts, in which case they might both be quantitative, but if not, the second one could be a cartoon or maybe a photograph. One year they even had a schedule. So what exactly is a factors synthesis? Typically, the prompt will say something to the effect of what factors should be considered when, and then it'll have the issue. Usually it's a bit more specific than that. They'll ask what factors a particular group should consider. So maybe it's a company, some particular stakeholder. If you're looking for examples of this type of prompt, I've included some of my favorites here. It's a bit old, but I do like the locavore one and also the wind farm prompt, and more recently, the food truck prompt. A couple others that are factors prompts are the monuments prompt. That one is a bit dated at this point, but I have seen some teachers update the sources to keep it current. And then there's the space debris prompt from 2025. So what exactly is a factor? Honestly, the answer to this is going to depend on the topic itself, but here are some general categories of factors. So for instance, there might be financial or economic factors. These could be local, national, or global. There could be environmental concerns. One factor might be the location or space or size, public interest or support, aesthetics, so what something looks like, the cost or price, that might go under financial concerns as well, but sometimes it's a little bit separate, ethics, and also health concerns. Now, this is just a general list, but depending on the topic itself, there might be other factors that are more specific to that topic. Think of factors as just the things that need to be considered. Now, keep in mind that certain factors are going to be more important than others. And so that's part of the process of writing this essay as well, is you want to think about which factors are most important. Another question you want to ask yourself as you are approaching the prompt is who are the stakeholders or the decision makers? This information is typically provided in the prompt. So for instance, if it says what factors should a company consider, then in that case, the company is the decision maker. But the stakeholders could be other people who are impacted. So it could be the community, society in general, maybe landowners or the government, possibly parents or children or educators, depending on the topic we're covering. It's important to recognize the decision makers and the stakeholders as you're approaching the sources, because this could help you write better commentary. If you're not considering who's affected by the issue, then you're not looking at the big picture. As you are looking at the sources, it's important to organize your notes because quite frankly, you don't have a ton of time to go through all the sources on exam day. The College Board recommends about 15 minutes for reading. Personally, I tell my students between 10 and 15 minutes because some are able to do it a bit more quickly and they want to save time for other parts of the exam. So as you are approaching the sources, ask yourself which factors are present in this source. You also want to look for good evidence that you can use to further your argument. So this would include real-world examples, expert quotes or testimony, facts, statistics, etc. I find it helps to make a T-chart with the factors on one side and the sources that address that factor on the other side. Sometimes I'll have my students add a plus, minus, or equal sign to indicate whether it is a positive view of that factor or issue, negative, or neutral. Admittedly, this doesn't work equally as well for all prompts, but some students like this method. So here is a quick example. I couldn't get the whole page to fit in the image on the screen, but I did zoom in so you can see a little bit of what I was talking about with the T-chart. So this is actually in relation to the food truck synthesis. So we've got the factors on the left and then which sources it was covered in. Sometimes as you're making your list, you might realize a factor later on, and then you could go back and say, oh, wait a minute, this other source did that too. So for instance, popularity, you'll notice it says BAF. That's because when we were looking at it, initially we didn't consider popularity a factor when we were looking at A, but then when we got to B, we realized, oh, wait, it is a factor in B, and it kind of does relate a little bit to A. So as you approach a source, it's entering the conversation. And it can be helpful to keep track of which sources address which factors, because as you're planning your main ideas, it'll help you narrow down your evidence. Now, you'll notice that next to some of the factors, there's a number with a circle, and you'll notice that the 2 is missing. It's actually not missing, it's just it was cut off in the picture. Those numbers were the hierarchy that we created. So after we were done reading all the sources, we felt that popularity was the most important factor to consider, whereas location in space and proximity to restaurants, those kind of go together a little bit, depending on how you analyze it. And those were important, but arguably less important. And you notice that furniture doesn't have a number next to it. So for our discussion that day, furniture was a factor that we identified, but it wasn't one that was going to make it into the essay. If you want to see the whole image of this, I did do a YouTube short that shows it in more detail. I'll try to link that in the description box below. So one thing you need to do is establish your line of reasoning. A line of reasoning is a logical progression of ideas. So you want to ask yourself which factor or factors are the most important. After you've read through the sources and are starting to plan your essay, you want to plan your line of reasoning. A line of reasoning is a logical progression of ideas. So you want to ask yourself which factors are the most important. So if you think back to the previous slide, that's why there were those numbers. The number 1 was the most important factor. This would mean that it would go in body paragraph 1. Because by numbering the factors, which ones were most important to least important, we were creating a hierarchy. So if our prompt is which factors should a company consider for whatever the topic is, we likely want to lead our argument with what we consider to be the number 1 or most important factor. Something else to think about as you're actually writing is to be sure to use transition words or phrases within your paragraphs and between your paragraphs. This helps your line of reasoning and it helps the reading experience for your reader. More tips for a line of reasoning. You want to have a clear, defensible thesis because that is the cornerstone of your essay. That's your anchor. I find it helps when the thesis clearly identifies the factors that should be considered. As someone who's been an AP reader for synthesis a few times now, I can say that it has been very helpful when the thesis clearly identified the factors. I think it helped the student. We also want to keep in mind that on exam day, you're writing a rough draft. From your thesis, we also want to consider your topic sentences. We want your topic sentences to help your line of reasoning. And you can do this by making sure that your topic sentences have a clear claim that relates back to your thesis. I tell my students that a really good topic sentence usually has what and why. So what's the factor and why does it matter? At the very least, we need what's the factor. The next step in establishing your line of reasoning is going to be to make sure that the evidence that you've selected clearly proves the factor that you've considered. Then you want to focus on your commentary. Now, here's where you got to dig deep. So you want to ask yourself, why does the evidence matter? Who or what is affected? And what are the short-term and long-term repercussions? Remember that we want more commentary than evidence. So we want to be choosing short quotes and really developing that commentary. Ask yourself why, how, or so what. Addressing the counter argument is not a mandatory component of the actual synthesis rubric. However, some teachers do make it a mandatory part of their classroom assignments. Addressing the counter argument effectively can lead to sophistication. So you might consider a concession and refutation or a counterclaim and rebuttal. I personally don't make it mandatory for my students. I tell them that if they think it will help their argument and they have time, they should go for it. But it's really a case-by-case basis for each student. If you're looking for more help with this, please check out the sentence frame video that I'm going to link in the description box. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell for notifications. I will be posting more synthesis videos this year in order to help teachers and students get ready for the AP Lang exam. So if you found this video helpful, please do me a huge favor and hit that like button. And until next time, happy writing.